we often use video games to connect
Yeah.
because my son and I can't take my son on the playground and toss a football around like other
Right.
parents can. I can't go roller skating or do these other things. So instead, we play video games, and
Yeah.
that's how we connect. Him and his brother and me, we like to play Ninja Turtles, and that's what we do. And they were playing Ninja Turtles as we were talking, and he's like, he said, "Thank you for doing what you guys do. Like this, having these games here makes it. We play them every time we're in the hospital. Makes a
Yeah.
big difference." And for the video game for us, I mean, we see this, every week.
Right.
I mean, it's happening probably right now as we're speaking, right? Like, there's something happening in a hospital. Kids are playing on our devices,
Yeah.
and that kind of those interactions they really light a fire to
Yeah.
like want to make you keep going.
Oh,
Like,
good. Welcome to Tardux, a podcast for content creators to come share their experiences, stories, and advice. And today I am super excited. I have Zach from Gamers Outreach. Welcome.
hey, how's it going, Barry?
Not too bad. Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, no
So,
problem.
what we do here, we start things off with 3 random questions. Let's get the juices flowing. So, are you ready?
Whew, all right, hit me.
All right. Last movie you saw.
Mario,
Okay.
most
What
recently.
what did you want to be when you grew up?
Race car driver.
Okay.
My
Which
dad actually, I have one back here. My dad used to build Indy cars back in the day, so that was like
okay.
that was the thing as a kid.
Nice.
He was,
Okay.
he wasn't very supportive of that dream, but that's what I wanted to do when I was growing up.
All right. Well, that leads me to the third question. So you get two choices here. You get to either do a lap or a couple of laps around any track in the world, or you get to go to a race anywhere in the world. Which one are you choosing?
Do a lap for sure. If I could drive an Indy car around Indianapolis Motor Speedway, that
Yeah.
would be pretty awesome. So
Oh, nice.
bucket list
Yep.
dream right there. Yep.
Very cool. All right. So, what is your background before Gamer Reach, came around?
Well, I grew up in the Midwest. Let's see. Yeah, I wanted to be a race car driver when I was a kid. Eventually grew up. Now I'm on a go-kart team here in Los
Oh, no
Angeles.
way.
So, I realized, yeah, you become an adult then, you can do what you want. You don't have to live under your parents' rules anymore. Yeah, so I grew up in Michigan and at a really young age developed an interest in video games. Was playing sports, had okay grades throughout school, was in a band with friends. We played like Celtic heavy rock. Yeah, I guess a comparison might be like Dropkick Murphys. Like
Okay. Yep.
our guitarist also played bagpipes, and so he would
Oh,
kind of
wow.
switch a little bit. So music was a big thing. Uh, you know, video games were a big thing. Sports were a thing, and but video games were always the consistent hobby. And I would come home from sports practice, come home from school. First thing I was doing was getting on my computer, hopping online, playing games with friends. And just through the years, developed an interest in the video game industry and came to believe I wanted to be working professionally in the gaming industry. And as a youngster, I didn't quite know what that meant really, but just knew that that was the goal. When I was 16 or 17, so I was about a junior in high school, I developed an interest in organizing video game tournaments. And long story short, I ended up organizing a Halo 2 tournament
Yeah.
at my high school. And I got really excited about this event and started trying to promote it
Yeah.
to all the kids in my community. So I was just really taking initiative. Like I put flyers in people's windshields. I was handing out promotional material at my school, convinced a bunch of friends to let me borrow their Xbox consoles.
Oh, now was this
Uh,
before, like, sort of, everybody had high speed, or still everybody, everybody was online gaming at that point, or was still sort of like a, a unique thing?
yeah, this is like 2006, 2007.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, now I'm trying to think back. DSL, broadband, when
Yeah.
did that stuff start coming out? Like, I mean, I remember, I still have the disc actually behind me. I remember playing like, Warcraft 2,
Yeah.
BattleNet Edition back in the day as a kid, or the original StarCraft.
Yeah.
And, you'd have like dial up internet, right? So
Yeah.
like you'd connect and there'd be like, all the sound that would,
Yeah.
and if your parents were on the phone, they would get disconnected, or like vice versa. If
Yeah.
they answered a call while you're on a game and get disconnected, and that was like a whole. I remember when we got like DSL in our household, and that was like a big deal
Yeah.
because suddenly my parents could like make a phone call and it wouldn't interrupt me playing Warcraft
Right.
at the same time. So this is back when First off, this was during a period of time when I don't even think the word esports
Yeah.
really existed in the mainstream vernacular.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, first off, video games were barely, I mean, they were existing in the mainstream vernacular, but there was still a lot of cultural stigma
Mhm.
around the gaming community, gaming culture, which actually feeds into the origin story of Gamers Outreach, funny enough. Um, and LAN centers were super relevant because if you wanted to compete or really, yeah, if you wanted to play seriously at a competitive level, the best way to do that was to put your computer next to somebody else's and connect on a local area network so that you would avoid any, problem with your connection. Yeah, so that was kind of the era. And Halo 2 in sort of the world of console gaming, Halo 2 was sort of like really one of the major FPS games for console gamers. I mean, first, it was a major FPS game, period. Like, up there with Counter Strike and
Right.
in terms of like cultural significance. Um, and for at the time, all of my friends every day at the lunch table were bragging about how good they were at Halo
Yeah.
2. And I developed an interest hosting video game tournaments because over the summer, I actually didn't feel well. I got sick. I had mono like
Yeah.
one summer. And I wasn't like in the hospital or anything, but it was just like, I didn't feel well. I was staying inside. I ended up missing a bunch of like summer sports practice for
Yeah.
football that year. And so during that time, I ended up playing way more video games than normal. I mean, I was playing a lot of video games anyway, but I
Yeah.
got really good at Mortal Kombat Deception. And speaking of online and connectivity, this Mortal Kombat title, I think it was the first Mortal Kombat game that you could play against other people on the internet. And I had logged, I mean, I played thousands of games. I think on my server, I broke into like the top 40 of our leaderboard of like 30,000 some players. And it's funny because now in hindsight, I can't remember if that was like all the players collectively or if they had split people up in servers. But in any case, I was playing this game a ton. And MTV, around that same time period, MTV had this television show called True Life, and they did an episode on a professional gamer, T Squared, who was a Halo player back in the day. I think he still casts a number of events, still in the scene very much. But they were following him around and Walshy and Final Boss, and they were kind of just following the whole sort of like MLG Halo 2 scene. And it was my first exposure to like competitive gaming. I had no idea video game tournaments like this existed. I really didn't have a sense of like the video game industry at large at the time, aside from reading something in a magazine, or about E3 or whatnot at
Right.
my local GameStop. But I saw this television show and I was like, man, this seems awesome. Selfishly, I want to compete. I wonder if there are Mortal Kombat tournaments around
Yeah.
because I wanted to brag to all my friends about how good I had gotten at this game. How much time I spent playing Mortal Kombat. When I got back to school, turns out I was really the only one playing Mortal Kombat. All my friends were playing Halo.
Yeah.
I wasn't super big on Halo 2, but I did get hop aboard the wagon when Halo 3 came out. Honestly, I was more of a PlayStation fanboy at that
Yeah.
time. I was playing a lot of like, as mentioned, Mortal Kombat, Final Fantasy, more like sort of RPG-esque games,
Yeah.
and PC games as well. But all my friends were playing Halo, and I was like, you know what? It would be really cool to organize a video game tournament. My friends talk smack every day at the lunch table. Let's put this together and give everybody the chance to compete.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where Gamers Outreach came from. I organized this video game tournament. I had about 300 kids signed up.
Yeah.
And a couple days before it was supposed to happen, funny enough, my mom thought it'd be a really good idea to call our local police department
Yeah.
because, hey, in her mind, and she was right, I think, hey, Zach, you've got all these kids coming to your
Right.
event. I had some parents who had volunteered to chaperone,
Yeah.
but it's like, you've got rival high schools coming out, some kids from colleges.
Yeah.
You don't know. Like maybe it's a nice idea to have like t-shirt security guy walking around just to make sure
Right.
kids don't
You
get
have
rowdy.
consoles there, and you don't. Yeah. You never know.
Yeah, right. I mean, I was borrowing all these consoles from friends, and I had told all of them, I was like, look, if anything happens to it, I'll pay you back.
Yeah.
In reality, that would have been a lot of hours at my minimum wage job at the time. So I'm really glad, nothing happened to them.
Yeah.
But I mean, they weren't at risk anyway. The tournament ended up getting canceled.
Oh shoot.
And yeah. So my mom called. My mom's like, hey, well, I'll help you out. We'll call the local police department and see if they have like an intern who can come by and just walk around. And it just so happened the person who picked up the phone belonged to this organization called the Parents Television Council. And admittedly, I don't know that much about this organization at the time. They were sort of like I guess you might call them like a media watchdog group. And I can respect what they do to some extent. I mean, they would like create content where they would try to explain to parents like, "Hey, here's a new album. Here's the content in that album." They would help parents try to make choices around like what sort of content, kids. But I think they had some viewpoints that, you might say go beyond just being informative, like where they would take, sort of a stance on a certain issue. And this particular individual, his belief was that kids should not be playing Halo 2 in a high school.
Oh, wow.
And when my mom called, she's like, "Hey, my son's running this video game tournament." The police officer responded and was like, "Are you aware that Halo 2 is an M-rated video game? I'm
Oh,
surprised
God.
the school, yeah, is allowing this to happen on your campus." And my mom's like, "Well, I'm not looking for your opinion. We just,
Right.
my son just wants to run this video game tournament. Do you guys want to help or not?" So this guy's like, "Well, I'll call you back. Just
Oh, God.
we'll stay in touch." Well, he never calls us back. He actually called my school district superintendent,
Oh.
and he like kind of pulled the authority card and was like,
Yeah.
"Listen, I just got a call from a parent. There's this kid at your high school who's trying to organize a Halo 2 tournament." And I'm quoting his voicemail. "I believe games like Halo are corrupting the minds of America's youth.
Oh,
This
my
event is a
God.
hazard to public safety because kids are training themselves to kill playing these violent video games.
Oh, my God.
And I don't feel it's appropriate for this to happen inside of a high school."
Yeah.
And so our superintendent got this message at the time. And in my community, there were some other like political things happening. Like the
Yeah.
superintendent was new in her job. She wasn't super popular with the teachers. And again, I'm not taking a
Right.
viewpoint. This
Yeah.
is this is
Yep.
all literally in newspapers. Someone can go back and read it if they want. But in her defense, she has this police officer who left a voicemail saying, "Listen, there's an event that's going to happen at your school.
Yeah.
You need to make sure this doesn't happen." And she basically revoked the permit that had been given to me
Yeah.
just a couple days before my tournament was supposed to happen.
Oh, my God.
And so she called the local township community
Yeah.
department. They call my parents. They're like, "Hey, we're really sorry. We have to cancel your permit. We just got this notice." And I went into the superintendent's office. She played this voicemail for me, and I was really disappointed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I literally cried in her office because I had put, all this work, especially
Yeah.
as a youngster. I had spent like anywhere between 3 to 6 months. I mean, this is something that's like a big deal in our minds as a high schooler, right? Like, we were really excited about this event. We had taken all this initiative to like promote and get our consoles and do all this work. And, then we were kind of being shut down for what I felt was just totally an unjust reason. Like, there wasn't anything wrong with my event. It wasn't like there was like a safety issue or something. There was a philosophical difference in opinion, or what sort of content I should be enjoying as a 17-year-old at the time. And, I tried to explain this to my my superintendent, like, "Hey, listen, I've been playing video games all my life. I don't think this is true." She didn't want to hear anything of it, right? She didn't know about video games. I mean, honestly, it's like again, from her perspective, it's like, here's a teenager, here's my local police chief. Like, who am I going to listen to?
And she's new at the job.
Yes, right. So she didn't want to like, I'm sure she had her reasons
Right.
too. So I ended up having to write this, blog post explaining to all the people who signed up, "Hey guys, I'm really sorry. The video game tournament has been canceled because apparently Halo's corrupting your minds." And I was pretty forthright. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't. I was just like, "Listen, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry this happened. Everyone, if you paid an entry fee, you'll get
Yeah.
refunded." This story ended up going viral. So at the time, there was this website called dig.com back in the day. You might remember,
Yeah.
sort of like the precursor to Reddit in a lot of ways. And someone in our local newspaper did a story with the angle, local teens try to do something productive, get shut down by the man. And someone uploaded that to dig.com and it went viral online. And a bunch of people in like the broader video game industry, caught the story and
Yeah.
started randomly just messaging me on social media. Uh, "Zach, heard about your Halo tournament being canceled, man. Like, dude, that's crazy. My church youth group, we host Halo tournaments all the time. Like, that's ridiculous." And I just started getting a number of these messages,
Yeah.
including from Bungie. So Marty O'Donnell from Bungie at the time, he wrote a letter to our local paper, like totally sticking up for us.
Wow.
And I quote this is like in the if you look up Gamers Outreach, it's another
Yeah.
little historical video. It's like, I challenge anyone to find content in Halo that's worse than what you'd see on primetime television.
Yeah.
I should know. I put all the audio in the game. You know, he basically just called out this. He's like, you know, it's like, I just think this is ridiculous. Who are these people protecting like the moral high ground in your community?
Oh, wow.
Bungie Studios will pay Zach and his friends any money they lost trying to organize this event. And that was really cool. And so we ended up getting like actually more attention
Right.
from this event being canceled. And at the time, I still wanted to host my video game tournament.
Yeah.
Like, got all these Xboxes sitting around. All my friends are like, well, we still want to play Halo. And I, as a gamer, you know, had always grown up with these sort of negative stereotypes around gaming and the gaming community,
Yeah.
which frankly, in my own opinion, had been perpetuated by, you know, talking heads who, you know,
Right.
get on a news show.
Yep.
Anytime there was something that would happen, we got to blame it on something. Let's blame it on the video games,
Yeah.
right? And so that just became part of like, I think, you know, mainstream culture's thinking, right or wrong,
Yeah.
because, oh, of course, these gaming,
So
you
violent.
know, you think about,
and-
yeah, I mean, you think about the evolution of games too, you know, from arcades to like, you know, just the graphic interfaces of
Yeah.
these things, like, you know, fairly new at the time, right? And kids are playing games, and there's all now parents are all concerned because that's like the new thing, right?
Right.
And I was just, it wasn't something I agreed with. I felt as a gamer, listen, every time I play games, I don't even see, I even hesitate to use the word escapism
Yeah.
when associated with video games. Not that people mean anything by that, but just that when I'm playing games, I'm not trying to escape anything. Life is good.
Yeah.
I'm trying to add to my life. Like,
Right.
I see games as being additive.
Mm-hmm.
When I play games, it's to connect with, nowadays, to connect with my younger brother
Totally.
who
Yeah.
lives 3 or 4 hours from me.
Yeah.
It's to enjoy a story.
Yeah.
It's to express creativity. It's to compete.
Yeah.
And I thought that those are always, you know, those are healthy attributes of gaming.
Yeah.
And when we as gamers come together and celebrate those things, I think good things can happen. And so it occurred to me, you know what? We've done all this work to host a video game tournament. Let's run a new event.
Yeah.
Let's take any money from ticket sales. Let's find a charitable cause to donate the money to.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to demonstrate, actually, here's what happens when gamers get together.
Right.
Nobody's corrupting their minds, you know, doing this stuff. Like, this can go from being a concern, you know, of the public to being a force for public good.
Right.
And that's how Gamers for Giving was born.
Yeah.
I wanted to run a new event for charity. We called it Gamers for Giving.
Yeah.
And the very first event was a LAN party combined with a Halo tournament.
Yeah.
So we teamed up with a group of people who've been running PC LANs. This is 2008 now.
Yeah.
And then we hosted our Halo tournament. And then to kind of help facilitate that fundraiser, someone sort of offhand suggested, you know, if you're going to be taking donations, you might want to consider starting a 501c3,
Yeah.
which is actually like a very over complicated thing to do if you're just hosting one fundraiser, for the
Yeah.
record. But I didn't know any better at the time. Naively, I was like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. So I went to the bookstore, picked up Nonprofit Kit for Dummies, and started
Oh,
reading through. And I
shoot.
was like, yeah, literally. And then like I wasn't old enough at the time to like file incorporation paperwork. So
Yeah.
like my dad, you know, if you look up the original, you know, 990, I think from Games
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, my dad signed the dotted line for me. He's like, hey, this seems like you're doing something good. You know,
Wow.
I'll
So as a
you
high
know,
school
help you
kid,
with this.
this is
Whatever.
where it all starts. The charity.
This was
begins.
Gamers Outreach. Yeah,
Wow.
Gamers Outreach was born. We hosted our very first Gamers for Giving event, and just by doing that event, a bunch of people in sort of the Midwest area came out, and you know, we had all this sort of like, we had some attention from the first event being canceled.
Yeah.
It garnered awareness from actually Walshy, who is a professional Halo player who happened to live in Grand Rapids,
Yeah.
which was a couple hours from us. He drove out, and you know, this is the time he's like at the peak of his Halo career, right? And he was like, hey man, you know, this is a really cool event. Like, I'm impressed with how it's been run. I think the cause is cool. I've been looking for something like this to, you know, to be involved with, and I'd like to stay in touch. And that's how Walsh and I ended up becoming friends.
Yeah.
And just through, and there's a few other sort of social relationships that began from this one event. From doing the event, I ended up accidentally networking with people in the video game industry. And at the time, you know, my interest was to work in video games. I never thought of Gamers Outreach as being my job. I just thought, oh, this is a fun, I want to do this event, and it's for charity. It'll be a lot of fun. And so when my guidance counselor in school was like, you know, it's time to think about college. What do you want to do? I was like, well, I want to work in video games. she said, "Well, you should study a lot of math." And at the time, that wasn't really the answer I wanted to hear. So
Right.
I was hosting gamers. I had just started hosting Gamers for Giving. I just started meeting folks in the industry,
Yeah.
and I thought, you know what? I'm gonna go take some time and figure this out on my own.
Uh-huh.
I Somebody had invited me to PAX. I'd never heard of PAX before,
Yeah.
and I remember flying to. I think I just graduated high school, and I told my parents I'm gonna hop on a plane to Seattle. We're gonna go to Penny Arcade Expo, and they're like, "What's PAX? Where are you going? Why are you going to Seattle? Who are you going with?" And of course, my parents are nervous. It's my first time really flying on my
Yeah.
own. I had just turned 18 at the time, so yeah, there was. I just was like, you know what? I'm gonna go explore gaming on my own. And so, Gamers Outreach. My thought at the time was, after we did Gamers for Giving, I became aware of the importance of charitable giving. And the way I kind of phrase it now is, I think most people, if you first off, the natural state is to not be involved with a cause, right? Unless you have a personal connection to something in your community, an illness, or something has happened, or you've made somehow a leap of faith to get involved, or you had really encouraging parents, or you're part of a community where like giving was a thing. Most people start out as being inactive in a charitable cause of some sort. And it takes that spark to get involved and start realizing giving back is I think a crucial element of creating healthy communities. I think especially in today's conversation, a sense of altruism is, I think, a critical component of not only building a healthy community, but also, frankly, finding happiness. uh, and making friends. If you don't give back, no one will like you.
Yeah.
So just that's it's a helpful thing to keep in mind. It's fine to have some selfish intent. I think
Yeah.
getting involved in a charitable cause. That's my own opinion. And so I was like, this is really cool. Like this event was fun. People had a good time. I had a great time organizing it, and we did a fundraiser. Our first event was for a local chapter of the Autism Society of America, and I thought this was really fun. They benefited from it. It
Yeah.
clearly made an impact for them. And so my reasoning was, you know what, we should keep this going. Let's do it again next year. And so long as this doesn't interrupt college or other my job, things I want to
Yeah.
do, we should keep doing it. And that's how Gamers Outreach was born. The second year, we uh, ended up we started trying to think through like, okay, well, what's the charitable cause we want to
Right.
raise money for this year? And somebody had suggested our local children's hospital
Yeah.
in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Sometimes they would try to buy video games for the kids, and they said, you're doing this video game event, and maybe it'd be relevant to like go support the hospital and do a fundraiser for them. And so I called up the hospital, and uh, Mott is a teaching hospital. They're
Mhm.
affiliated with the University of Michigan. I think they were a little more willing to like hear out an 18-year-old at the time, 19 year
Right.
old. And so I stopped by the hospital, and they said, "Hey, it's really great you want to do this event. Maybe you could help buy video games for the kids. We actually do that sometimes. It would be relevant for your fundraiser." And what I ended up learning just from just this one visit at the hospital was
Yeah.
that they were buying Game Boys and PlayStation Portables for the kids, and were continuously doing that. So
Yeah.
they would raise money, they would buy items for the kids in the hospital in that moment.
Yeah.
But as soon as those kids left, so did the
Ah.
equipment they purchased.
Yeah.
And as a donor and gamer, my sort of thought became, well, that's really cool for these kids, but ultimately you're not really like I'm just gonna have to keep fundraising for the same
Right.
thing
Yeah.
over and over and over again. There's no end to this. What if we built you a tool to keep all those games within your environment so that instead of you like giving away these things, you could just roll it room to room potentially. And I used to have like this little cabinet in my bedroom where my games existed and it had wheels on it. And I was like, well, maybe we could build you some sort of like cabinet or apparatus to like hold an Xbox or a PlayStation. And that's how we started constructing these like portable video game carts.
The go-kart.
So the go kart, yeah. So I'm kind of like going through the history here, at Gamers Outreach, but the discovery I made was like, the hospital needed a way to make sure games were secure and mobile in their environments. And so I thought, okay, well, let's build some sort of like apparatus to store your games. And we ended up calling a medical company. We repurposed like an existing product they made. We built this one gaming cart. So we did our next event. We raised some money. We used the money to buy this gaming cart. The hospital loved it. They asked for another one. Oh, okay. Well, I guess we'll wait until next year. We'll buy you another one. Then a neighboring hospital found out what we had done. they asked for one. And then simultaneously, while this was going on, I was starting to network with marketing agencies in the video game industry.
Yeah.
And so, as an example, there's an agency called Encompass,
Mhm.
and I was one of the only people who was sort of organizing these esports events outside of like MLG and ESEA,
Yeah.
and who I ended up working for Craig Levine actually directly for a number of years, and that guy's awesome. He gave me one of my first jobs in the industry. But these agencies would hit me up and they would say, hey, Activision's hiring us to host Call of Duty XP. We need some help managing the players. Would you want to fly to
Oh,
Los
wow.
Angeles and work this event with us? So like I'm looking at it right now actually on my shelf. One of the very first events I worked was Call of Duty XP back in the day. And I
Yeah.
think that event was that 2011 or 2013? I think it was 2011 when COD XP happened. Someone might need to. My memory's really bad now.
Yeah.
Someone might have to fact check me on that. But I would go out, and the point of the story is I ended up meeting other people in the gaming industry,
Right.
became friends with a lot of the pro esports players because
Yeah.
I was like, responsible for helping make sure they knew where they were going during the
Yeah.
live events. And then they would just sort of, we got to know each other, they would find out about the stuff I was doing via Gamers Outreach, and they'd
Yeah.
say, Zach, that's really cool. I saw on Facebook you posted about delivering that gaming cart. Could we build one for a hospital in Seattle?
Oh,
Could we build
wow.
one for a hospital in Los Angeles? And so Gamers Outreach just organically started growing
Yeah.
over the years. So fast forward 16 years now, Gamers Outreach now has a presence in about 400 healthcare facilities,
Wow.
primarily in the U.S.
Yeah.
We're in pretty much every children's hospital
Yeah.
across the U.S. We estimate our devices enable as many as 5 million gaming experiences each year for kids and families. And that's across all the the gaming carts
Yeah.
that we've deployed. And really, our focus as we've matured, as the organization has matured, the realization I started coming to was it turns out the problem that existed in my local children's hospital
Yeah.
exists across all hospitals.
Right.
There's a lot of emphasis on research and treatment. And because of that, quality of life takes a backseat.
Yeah.
And that's not a knock on the doctors, the
No,
folks doing their job.
it's
Yeah.
they just want to be they want to heal them, and but part of that healing experience is the mental aspect of it.
Yep, exactly. And so there's really been in my opinion, there's a lack of resources that are really able to be committed to the entertainment experience, even though it's an important aspect of healthcare.
Yeah.
I feel gaming makes play and activities accessible at scale.
Mhm.
A 10-year-old has as much fun on an Xbox as someone like me in their 30s. And so in that way, games transcend age relevance. If children are stuck in their rooms, they transcend physical barriers. If kids are looking for opportunities to socialize, if the healthcare workers are trying to distract kids from a treatment or lower anxiety. I mean, now we're seeing all these instances where games are making an impact in hospitals and actually helping with the healthcare process. And that's all been stuff we've learned along the way. When we started, my naive, you know, and you see this kind of theme of naivety throughout gamers arts history, really. But my naive thought was, well, I like games. If I was in the hospital at the time, I would have gone to a pediatric hospital. If I was here, certainly I would want to play video games. We should give the kids video games. And um, now it's what we've learned, of course, is that games are making a really tremendous difference. And if we can help hospitals manage their video game devices, manage their video game content, we can enable play for all the kids and families at the same time. And I don't think it's just applicable to kids' hospitals. I think adult hospitals as well, especially as we're all growing up now. It's like, listen, man, if I had my wisdom teeth out, I mean, I did. I had my wisdom teeth out in my early 20s. Which was late. I was sitting playing Mass Effect. Like that was great.
Yeah.
Like I had a great time. I didn't even think about I was like, I'm sitting on my couch for 2 weeks. I'm eating
Yeah.
mac and cheese every day. I'm going to play Mass Effect. And I had zero guilt about not doing anything else because I was like, I have to do this. I
Yeah.
have to be here and recover. So yeah, I think I've really become very enthusiastic about the work we do.
Yeah.
I think it's a great calling for gamers, really, because in order to do this work, you have to have knowledge of how video games
Yeah.
are connected in these environments. You have to have some knowledge of the network requirements in
Mhm.
hospitals, what games kids should be playing, how these
Yeah.
devices can be implemented. And so really, if you're not a video game enthusiast, you're not going to be able to work on this project
Right.
to some extent, or if you don't at least have basic knowledge. And so in that way, it's up to us as gamers to solve this problem.
Yep.
This problem will not get solved if we don't step forward and help make an impact in these
Absolutely.
environments. So, yeah.
Yeah, and
Anyway,
like you were saying, the fact that we're all getting older, all of us gamers. I'm a child of the '70s. I remember the Atari 2600. Growing up playing video games all my life. Now you've got 50-year-olds, 40-year-olds who just gaming is not a foreign thing, and it's just a part of everyday life. And now we know how much gaming can help people, and now by you through your organization, we can we've got professionals who are ready to donate or help or whatever we can to help spread that that out to the other hospitals.
totally. And a big reason our work exists and the number of hospitals I mentioned earlier is really thanks to gamers coming forward and fundraising.
Yeah,
A lot of if you've probably seen online, I think it's actually how you DM me.
yeah,
We will host a handful of events throughout the year where streamers will step up.
yeah,
They'll raise money with their communities, and then we'll take those funds and we're able to support either hospitals on our wish list or
yeah,
sometimes even hospitals based on the streamer's request. Over the fall, back in October, there's this group called Hermit,
yeah.
a group of Minecraft creators, and they raised like over $400,000
Holy crap!
in the course of 4 hours.
Wow.
Absolutely insane.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, for like that's a very like anomaly type fundraiser. Like that's what they achieved is remarkable, and we're now delivering like quite a whole fleet of our gaming carts to hospitals that they've requested. So we're reaching new countries now. We're fulfilling wish list requests that we've had for a period of time. Actually, next week I'm flying to Portland to meet up with one of them, and we're gonna kind of visit a hospital that's happening. So that's getting a go kart. So, um, it's really remarkable. It's so cool, to see the gaming community make this impact, and I feel excited to be a part of this and really a great sense of responsibility as well from a stewardship standpoint to make sure we are being as transparent as is reasonable, to let people know what we're doing, with funds. And so we try to write an annual report every year. We record like during Gamer Show Giving, we always try to, in the last few years, we tried to record video content to kind of like give people a sense of like, here's what we're working on, here's what we think is important. So that folks know where their money's going. And so I think as far as charities go, I'm biased saying this, but I think we're pretty much as transparent as it possibly gets because
yeah,
if people donate, we build tangible things. Like we
yeah.
build these gaming carts. We have these cool vending machines we're working on right now called Save Points.
Oh, cool.
So we've added a few more programs since
Yeah,
the go karts. Really, we're trying to create like an entire entertainment ecosystem in hospitals.
yeah,
Like the phrase I like to use is, one day we want to look back and ask ourselves, remember when hospitals didn't have video games?
yeah,
Like that's the big goal. And the way we're sort of trying to approach that is by, building the go-karts. Those are sort
yeah,
of like a hardware tool. We have these things called save point machines, which are like we only have one right now, but we have like a couple more that we're going to place hopefully this year, just depending on fundraising
yeah,
results. And the goal is for those to be like distribution hubs.
yeah.
So like if a kid's going through treatment, the hospital can like award them, tokens to go use the save
Oh,
point
okay.
machine.
Yeah,
The more fun idea we have is I really want to almost like take some inspiration from like Chuck E. Cheese and use these machines as like hubs for prizing.
yeah,
Like if we run a tournament at the hospital for kids, like
yeah,
congratulations, first place, you get 10 tokens for the save point. You can go claim a really cool prize.
yeah.
Maybe we work with brand partners to like, oh my gosh, there's a Herman Miller Logitech chair,
Right. Yeah,
like something absolutely ridiculous, right? One of the machines, and just like creating that real fun sense of wonder and excitement for the kids.
yeah.
So we're pretty pumped about it. I think the program, it's very early stages right now, but
Yeah.
like fast forward 3 years, we have a lot of really fun ideas for it that I'm hopeful will come to fruition. And then we have Player Two, which is a volunteer program
Right.
where
Yeah.
gamers volunteer and sort of like trying to like bring Best Buy Geek Squad into hospitals,
Yeah.
basically, like help with tech support. And then we have another program we've been noodling on for a while called Portal, which is basically a software platform that helps hospitals manage content
Yeah.
across hundreds of rooms. And we're going to be doing some more serious development on that this summer, which we're excited about. We're piloting it with Seattle Children's is the plan. So hopeful to share more news as it
Yeah.
kind of gets worked on. But the whole idea is that if you combine all those things in a hospital, it's like you can solve all of it, or at
Right.
least a good chunk of it. And I think there will always be other little nuanced examples where it's like, okay, let's, this kid wants to play games on an iPad. This other kid, we're
Right.
gonna give them a gift bag. Of course, like there's tons of this is just like sort of one piece of the
Yeah.
overall system. But I think taking care of the gaming solves a huge chunk
Yes.
of the sort of entertainment vacuum that currently exists in a lot of
Yeah.
places. So
And now, how are you dealing with like because everything is digital these days, you don't have to worry about the discs and whatnot. Is that something that you're trying to actually build into what you're bringing to the hospital, so they each system has access to the library of games, whatever the kids want to play? Sort of, the hospital is governing what games they have access to, but so that all the kids can play the games.
yeah, that's a great question. This kind of speaks to some of the nuance of medical environments that
Yeah.
we work in. I and again, this is my own opinion speaking here. I have probably set foot in nearly 100 hospitals around the country at this point over the
Yeah.
years. And I would compare hospitals almost similar to the public school system,
Hmm.
where what I mean by that is if you go to a certain school district where it's maybe an affluent area,
Yeah.
that hospital, that school might look like a college campus.
Yep.
Like best, like the football field is turf.
Yeah.
The kids have the best curriculum, right? There's like a whole graphic design department
Right.
and
They got the
whatever
3D printers. They've got everything.
the
Yes.
latest and greatest,
Yeah.
yeah. And then you can go 40 minutes or an hour up the street in an area that's not as well funded, and the teachers are struggling to give kids pencils. They
Right.
want better pay, right? And so, in my own opinion, I think like, and this isn't totally accurate, but just broadly thinking on it, the hospitals we work in are resourced in almost similar ways,
Yeah.
where like there might be a hospital that's city funded, and if the
Hmm.
city is going through a hard time, that hospital has less resources to work with
Yeah.
than a hospital that might be more sort of brand name to the state,
Right.
or might be university affiliated in some ways, where they have like an endowment fund or
Yeah.
big alumni network to reach out to for donors. And so one of the things we try to do is sometimes we'll try to guide donors.
Yeah.
If someone says, I don't have like a strong affiliation with a particular hospital, oh great, we can recommend some to you,
Yeah.
that don't get thought of as
Oh,
often
that's
as
good.
others. So that's an approach we try to take. And on the question that you asked, within that, these hospitals, the infrastructure within these places
Yeah.
varies across the board. Sometimes we're working with hospitals where they have like a DVD folder that they're still, they're pulling
Yeah.
out discs, because they want the kids to watch movies. They might not have great internet in the
True.
hospital to
Yeah.
where they can stream Netflix.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm thinking of some very large hospitals where, yeah, they're pulling out the Blu-ray folder, right?
Yeah.
And so you'll notice, and like, actually, I have one of the go-karts behind me. We have like little, we try to deliver consoles that have, that you can insert a disc to,
Right. Yeah.
so that a hospital can make use of stuff they might have already.
Yeah.
Now, some hospitals, to your point, like do prefer games digitally installed. And great
Yeah.
news, we can set up an account on an Xbox. Games are digitally installed. And usually, when like if someone raises money for a go kart,
Yeah.
part of our job is we actually hire people. We have an operations team, and part of their job is each week they're taking a certain number of
Oh,
Xboxes or
cool.
PlayStations. Yeah, so we have two guys, George and Martin, on our team.
Yeah.
Martin is responsible for go-kart logistics. So
Yeah.
he coordinates like go-kart shipments and makes sure they get to the proper place.
Yeah.
And we have another guy named George who does support, but he also helps prep consoles for delivery.
Yeah.
So, we have like kind of a starter kit of games that we'll
Yeah.
install. So we'll install, family-friendly titles, things that are like not debatable in hospitals in terms of like
Yes.
content for kids.
Yeah.
Lego games, Minecraft, Rocket League.
Yeah.
And then, we install that stuff on the console. We send it to the hospital. What the hospital does with it after that is really up to them. So
Yeah.
we're available to provide ongoing support. If a kid gets mad that they lost a game and throws a controller, we encourage the hospitals to reach out to us. We
Yeah.
try to replace it. That's sort of part of our commitment as a nonprofit, is like, so long as we have funding and exist, we
Yeah.
want to try to be of support to the hospitals. And so as a kind of anecdote there, like, when people donate to Gamers Outreach, if someone just randomly donates $20 on our
Yeah.
website, it funds those sorts of things. So like our
Yeah.
ongoing activity, which helps us support hospitals. But we really, leave it to hospitals to some extent. We don't know at an individual level,
Yeah.
okay, this child is 15 years old. The parents are okay with this child playing Call of Duty.
Yeah.
It's not really our job to
No,
moderate
it's not.
that. We leave it up to the hospital
Yeah.
to, decide in that
Yeah.
sense.
And now how about like for like assistive controllers and things like that? Are are the hospitals, hey, can we include this for, this, for this department of the hospital, or, how do you, is that an option for the hospitals?
Yeah, it's a great question. The topic of assistive devices in hospitals is particularly relevant. It's one of those topics though that it's actually kind of similar to the question I just answered previously. At an individual level, if you're a healthcare worker and you're supporting a patient
Yeah.
who would benefit from like the Xbox adaptive controller
Right.
as an
Yeah.
example, it's really up to that healthcare worker to work with that patient to create the setup that that
Gotcha.
child might want or need.
Yeah.
We have on occasion delivered accessible devices with go-karts.
Yeah.
It's something where if the hospital asks for it,
Yeah.
we can provide them. Um, the challenge with those, even if we were to provide them with all go-karts, which we
Yeah.
don't at the moment, but if we were to, even if you give those items to the hospital, the use of them is still dependent on
Yeah.
a health worker on the ground level who is able to, really
Yeah.
support kids. And one of the challenges in that is I'll mention like of the hospitals we support, a number of hospitals are starting to create roles for, let's call them like digital activity specialists, like
Yeah.
someone whose whole job in the hospital is to like manage playtime with the kids.
Yeah.
Manage the iPads, the laptops, the go-karts, all the different things that are kind
Yeah.
of like starting to float around. Um, the but still one of the challenges. So first off, one, those roles are starting to exist, but there's still a bunch of hospitals that don't have those roles. And then even in the case where the roles exist, or if they don't, but the person happens to know about games, you still have a time management issue. And
Yes.
the example I try to paint for people is like, imagine you're a health worker and you're responsible for 10 rooms in a shift.
Yeah.
And this is just like easy math here.
Yep.
The way you budget your time during your shift matters a ton. Because if you are, let's say you have a 10-hour shift, right?
Yeah.
Again, easy math. 10 rooms, 10 hours. Okay, at most you can commit maybe 1 hour per room in the day in the shift. Now, maybe some of them you don't need an hour, maybe something you do, but that doesn't account for the fact that you probably need to eat lunch. You probably need to do some paperwork, send some emails, like, you're doing all these other things that take away your time from patients. So really, you're coming down to like, okay, maybe you're actually only spending 20 minutes with patients. You have to fill out charts. You have to. So hospitals, a big way hospitals determine efficiency is actually by considering what are our staff spending time on? And that informs efficiency for staff. And frankly, I think it's actually a value of video games in hospitals. If we can demonstrate video games help alleviate burdens of staff and help create more time, that's immensely helpful. In some ways, we're seeing that. A story I tell regularly, we had a child that was being supported by a go-kart. This particular kid had really severe burns on the side of his arm, and uh, every few days, health workers were coming in to like change out bandages. It got to a point where this kid was really anxious over the process, though, because it's really uncomfortable. And 6 different workers were holding him down to complete the procedure. Someone found out he liked playing Lego Batman. They wheeled in one of our go karts. They let him play for a couple hours. By the time his procedure was supposed to happen, his only concern was whether he could keep playing Lego Batman. So he was
Perfect.
totally distracted.
Yeah.
Anxiety was lowered. It
Yeah.
went from 6 health workers helping this child down to 2.
Perfect.
One to change the Band-Aid,
Yeah.
the other to hold the second end of the controller. Like this kid gave his arm and was like trying to play the game with one hand
Yeah.
while the health worker was helping.
Oh, shoot.
And that's a big deal because suddenly, this kid, 3 points. This kid is having a better healthcare experience thanks to games.
Yeah.
The workers are having an easier time doing their job. They're not trying to make this kid's life worse, right? They're just
Yeah.
trying to help them out. But then there's an economic argument to be made for the hospital because those 4 other workers can go support other patients.
Right. Yeah.
That's a big deal. And so we see this. We had another kid who was trying to regain mobility, and the health worker was asking this child to complete standing exercises each
Yeah.
day. And after this person had been completing exercises, they introduced one of our go-karts, and they're like, "Hey, while you're standing, you can play video games." The child ended up standing for 3 times as long as they had previously
Yeah.
when video games were introduced.
Nice.
And so those are called you're helping patients reach outcomes faster potentially. Hey, it's kind of like the way I compare it, it's like if you go to the gym and you're listening to your favorite song comes on,
Yeah.
you got your earbuds in. And it just gives you that little extra sense of like, I'm gonna,
Right. And a
The Rocky
distraction
song is
too.
on.
You know,
Right.
you don't think about it. Yeah.
You're in the zone, So it's very similar, I think, in that way. I think, and these are just, I mean, there's a list. We see this stuff every
Yeah.
week. So yeah, I think when it comes to, that's a tangent on your original question of accessible devices. The big challenge is how do you, I think in hospitals at least, roll that stuff out at scale.
Yeah.
And I think inevitably at some point we'll get to a place where more health workers are more familiar with games. And so
Yeah.
that might be, but even as a gamer, if you're not someone who has fiddled with an accessible controller or gone through accessible settings, I mean, it would take me, like,
Yeah.
I don't really play with those settings personally. And so for
Yeah.
me to sit down with someone, okay, I need to spend some time, like, okay, what is this game?
Yeah.
Are there accessible features in this game? That's question one. Sometimes the answer is no.
Right. Yeah.
If there are, okay, how do I like adjust this controller,
Yeah.
right? So there's some great groups that work on that stuff. Able Gamers is a big advocacy organization.
Yeah.
They do quite a bit of work helping provide grants to people. They help developers, be mindful of
Yeah.
putting accessibility features in games. Special Effects is another one in the UK.
Yeah.
And I mean, those are the two groups that come to
Yeah.
mind offhand. So yeah, we as Gamers Outreach, our focus is more broadly, like how do we make video games exist in
Well,
hospitals?
and that
Yeah.
goes into my other question that I was going to ask you about. Are you working with, hospitals or doing trade shows to help, pitch that idea to let hospitals who may not even know about it that, hey, yeah, put this program in place and it can help help the kids, help the healthcare workers as well.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. We attend conference, like we usually participate in what's called the Child Life Conference each year. There's a handful of sort of like medical industry trade shows you can go to. Part of it though is just honestly, the big challenge is it's just a financial quandary. I have it somewhere on my desk here. I was just reading it the other day. Children's Hospital Los Angeles just mailed me, I'm looking for it. They just mailed me their annual report and I will pull it out. I have it right here, actually. Check this out. I want to cite a number. So in this report, they've got their statement of operations. Last year, they had total operating revenue of $1.3 billion, and their operating expenses were $1.44 billion.
Holy crap.
So there was a loss of if I'm reading this right,
Yeah.
there was a loss of $59 million for the hospital.
Yeah.
So, and I think the last one of these I saw, they maybe had a surplus of like 500K.
Jeez.
If you're a hospital, your first thought is probably not to buy video games.
Yeah.
If that's like the financial situation you're fighting against.
Right.
These hospitals are fundraising, they're trying to get grants from the state. There's all sorts of things that are going on. Even in a situation where like, oh, look, we have a 500 grand surplus. I mean, that's like, we need to hire a doctor. We need to get a surgeon in here. What are the, so
Yeah.
that's where, if you were to install an Xbox in every room of a hospital, I mean, that alone, buying the consoles is going to be $500,000.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to configure some piece of hardware to like affix that to the wall so it doesn't get
And
lost
who's
or
going to
stolen.
support that? And yeah.
Right. So that's part of the reason you don't see widespread adoption of games in hospitals. Like,
Yeah.
well, this seems so obvious. Why don't all hospitals do it? Part of it is a priority question,
Yeah.
and I will mention some hospitals are starting to prioritize it, or they're looking for donors
Yeah.
who can support these sorts of projects. That's why we really exist as a nonprofit in a large way. Is I think of nonprofits broadly. Our role is to instigate commercial activity. And this is sort of a belief I've developed in like really the last couple of years, funny enough. But the example I sort of give is imagine like a village in a very in the middle of nowhere that doesn't have access to clean drinking water. It's unlikely a water bottle company will come in and start selling water bottles or transporting water into that place because that's not what they do. And there might not even be an economy to support that, right? But a charity group can come in, build a drinking well. Maybe all of us believe from a value standpoint, like it's important for people to have access to clean drinking water. Let's help these people. We all pitch in money, we donate. Group goes in, they build the well. Suddenly, this community has access to clean drinking water. Fantastic. Well, fast forward 10 years, the people's health improves. The community grows larger.
Mhm.
Suddenly, they build more homes. They build a marketplace where there's a little grocery store. And guess what? The water bottle company comes in and now they're suddenly
Yeah.
giving water to people. Now people, and this is not, you can take this down another train of thought, like, well, water bottle companies are profiteering. I'm not, this is not a defense of
Right.
capitalism or something. But the point I'm making is just simply the nonprofit comes in and instigates the activity. It
Yeah.
creates the environment for scale.
Mm-hmm.
I think nonprofits are very good at starting activity, and for-profits are very good at maintaining it or scaling it up.
Yeah.
And our role as Gamers Outreach, I mean, we're focused on trying to solve the problem, which to me is, how do we make entertainment widely accessible to hospitals?
Right. Yeah.
Let's do that through video games.
Yeah.
And we exist as a nonprofit primarily because, especially when we started, it wasn't clear, and I would say probably still isn't as much of the thing, that like there's something like, do hospitals pay for this? Do patients
Right.
pay
Yep.
for it? I don't really think it's like, I don't think patients should pay for it. There's
No.
like a philosophical piece there. So yeah, we exist as a nonprofit. We donate these items to hospitals. Sometimes we have hospitals that do have budgets. They say, hey, we actually have funding. We want to increase our entertainment offerings to
Yeah.
patients. Or they might have a donor internally. Like this has happened quite a number of times where like a child has benefited from one of our go-karts.
Yep.
And then the parents come forward and say, hey, this thing is awesome.
Yeah.
We need more of these for the kids. And so that's in some ways expanded our work as well.
Excellent. Yeah. How I found you mentioned earlier getting the streamers was Markstrom. He was like one of the first 10 people on my pod, and we talked about his charity that he supports, and he talked about, Gamers Outreach. And I was like, holy crap, that's such a cool concept. And then, since I jumped into, this whole podcast started from Escape from Tarkov, and then it grew, let's bring on content creators and hear their stories. And then it's like, Twitch, who watches people play video games? Like, oh, there's communities. And then you see the giving that the gamers communities generate, and it's just remarkable.
Yeah, Markstrom especially. First off, I think he's our top fundraiser in terms of streamers.
Yeah.
Like, and he just crossed like over 200 grand raised, or he had done it previously, but like he's just put up phenomenal numbers.
Yeah.
Overall, his community like steps forward in a massive way each year. And what's so great about Markstrom, I'm just a big fan of his, but his story to me is really fascinating, and it kind of reminds me of like the phrase "fate loves irony." He was studying to become a doctor.
Yeah.
You might know this already, and he ended up dropping out of that pursuit to pursue his career in streaming.
Yeah.
And to me, it just feels very funny that like we exist, and now he in a lot of ways is supporting the patients and families going through these situations and helping their healthcare process and helping them recover, during their journey. So that to me, I remember I think it was the first year he was involved with us. I watched a video he had recorded, and that just really struck me as something pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so he's definitely like, I mean, he's such a cool guy, and the fact that he's involved every year and makes such an effort is so commendable. And I'm just a big fan of his generally. So
cool. Now, how do you
cool you found us through him?
It is, yeah. It's been a cool experience, the whole podcast thing. How do you end up finding your content creators, your streamers? Do they reach out to you, or do you say, hey, I've got are you interested in this?
Yeah, it's a combination of both, really.
Yeah.
I mean, our initial network of content creators sort of emerged from the esports scene, from the work I had done in the industry previously.
Yeah.
And then we have folks who found out about us organically in that way, and then we send out we'll invite streamers too. We like to, I mean, we all sit around watching Twitch each day. Like I'll have it on the background, our team will have it on the background.
Yeah.
And so we'll there's a handful of folks that like we'll catch their content, and we'll say, hey, like does our cause resonate with you? So that's pretty much it. Cool. It's actually that simple. We reach out, we try to explain who we are.
Yeah.
It's the nice thing too is like anytime a streamer gets involved, it's helpful because they also are helping to spread the message of what we're doing.
Right, yeah.
And oftentimes they'll get other folks involved.
Yeah.
And ultimately I think to solve the challenge we're trying to tackle, that's really what it requires. There's no way a single group can work on this problem. I mean, just in the US alone, there are 6,000 total hospitals.
Yeah.
If you include all facilities. If you zoom out worldwide, excluding like China, like I think China has like over 30,000 hospitals alone. But so India and China are sort of anomalies. If you exclude them, there's like 50,000 hospitals worldwide, over almost 100,000, if not more, if you include those two countries. And like, so it's just, this is a huge thing we're trying to tackle.
Yeah.
I think ultimately a lot of it is going to come down to like community advocacy, and a lot of our sort of outward messaging you see is speaking to gamers, right?
Yep.
Because I think video game enthusiasts probably understand what we do the easiest, you
Right.
know? Like, of
Yep.
course, all of us, hey, I want to give video games to kids in hospitals. Makes total sense. I get
Yep.
it, you know? We do have sort of more of an institutional voice when we speak to hospitals, you know, when
Yes.
we go work with healthcare settings and
Yep.
you know, medical workers and whoever else in those
Yep.
places. Um, but a lot of times when you're like reading our tweets or reading a blog post, it's kind of like a little bit of a
Well,
like
that's
70% gamer for
yeah.
30%, you know,
Well, because
hospital
that's the
speak.
reach, from a tweet standpoint. That's who's seeing those, and going into the hospitals. You're going to go in a different path for the most part to communicate to those people.
Yep,
And
totally.
now, outside of the content creators, I've seen you've had Austin Creed, The Rock,
Yeah, actually, speaking
and the
of,
Giants.
yeah, actually, I have this fun. It's in the background here, but so Austin Creed, WWE wrestler, went on Wheel of Fortune. This is back in October now, and he competed on an episode of Celebrity Wheel of Fortune, and he did a phenomenal job. We could not have asked for a better Wheel of Fortune competitor. If you go back and watch the show, like outside of him, like getting insanely lucky, like I don't think there's any way he could have done a better job. Um, he won 90 grand for Gamers Outreach, and the folks at the show sent us this really cool plaque to kind of commemorate the occasion. Yeah, so it's got his name here on the plaque, and so it's I actually don't really have I've been meaning to hang it up on my wall somewhere, but I don't have like a good spot for it yet.
Yeah,
So it's just
that's
kind of
so
sitting behind
cool.
the go kart. Yeah, we've been really fortunate. Gamers Arch has been around for 16 years,
Yeah,
right? So I think organically there's a lot of athletes who play video games
yeah,
and they find out about our cause. We don't really have like an agency that reaches out to people.
yeah. Because
Maybe we should get an agency who reaches out to people, but a lot of times, like when you see us working with folks, it's pretty organic.
yeah, because I saw the
We
cleats from the oh god, what's his name?
let's
The
see, Casey
launch.
Kreiter.
Yes, Casey. Yeah,
Yep,
I saw the cleats. I was like, those are
yep.
really cool.
Yep, yeah, actually, I'm looking at those 2. We've had a few people, we've had a few guys, wear cleats
Nice.
or Gamers RH or the last few years especially, and
Yeah,
yeah, that's pretty fun, man. I mean, shout out to Casey Kreiter, actually, we just had we host a LAN party every year, Gamers for Giving,
yeah.
and, we just did our first event back, in 4 years, which is crazy, and, he flew out and was joining us. It was really fun to hang out.
Awesome.
Um, yeah, and we just did we have a we just had a partnership with Christian McCafferty as well.
Oh, no way.
We delivered some gaming cards, yep, to hospitals
Nice.
that he was supportive of, and he has a really cool story. He had a young fan who was a big gamer and was in the
Yeah.
hospital and unfortunately passed away. But to help honor his memory, this Christian and his team have decided to donate gaming devices to
Oh,
hospitals, and they
wow.
reached out to us, and so we've been helping them make that happen. And it's just really cool. It's really fun to be able to work with these guys. I mean,
Yeah.
especially growing up playing sports, it's
Yeah.
like I mean, my football coaches, I remember telling them I was big on gaming, and I always got flack for that. And so now it's
Yeah.
like, ha, I had the
Yeah.
last word. So selfishly, that's kind of what always goes through my head. But
Yep.
it's just really cool, man. It's really fun to see these guys like reach out, use their platforms
Yeah.
in the way that they do, and we're just happy to be a part of it.
Awesome.
The Rock was a fun one. I think that's like my pinned tweet at the moment because I
Yeah.
just don't feel like The Rock is like the biggest Hollywood actor, right?
Yeah.
And he's just like such a big personality, and his team, Xbox was launching their new console. His team was involved with that, and they wanted to include sort of a charitable component with
Yeah.
what they were doing. And he's really big on giving back. Like he's
Yeah.
super active and doing that stuff. And of course, we
That's
bring
amazing.
Xboxes into
Yeah.
hospital, so it made sense for us to be included. So yeah, he donated 20 go karts, if I remember right, to a bunch of hospitals.
Yeah.
Maybe it was 30, 20 or 30 go karts. Yeah, my memory's so bad lately. But he donated like a quantity of units and made a fun video about it,
Yeah.
and it was really cool.
Nice.
It's yeah, really fun.
And now, over the years, what's been some of the hardest parts about running Gamers Outreach? Like things.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's a list. First off, it's definitely challenging running an organization. Period. I think. I think as an opinion again, I think everyone should take some time in their life to try to start a company. And if you, in my mind, a great way to frame that is to ask yourself, are there problems that exist you're interested in solving? Or is there a problem that you're experiencing that you would like to see solved? If the answer to that is yes, you should form a company around it. Because really, problems and complaints are calling cards for entrepreneurs. If someone is complaining about a thing, that's probably an indicator there's some sort of market for it to provide a good or service
Yeah.
to solve the problem.
That's a great quote.
Um,
I like that. If there's a problem, there's an opportunity for an entrepreneur.
yeah, I mean, think that's. I mean, you can go on Twitter every day and watch like, okay, what are people, what's something that's bothering somebody today?
Right.
What are things that are bothering me? And just developing that sense of awareness, I think, is really the big difference. Most
Yeah.
people, I think, a lot of folks, if they're struggling to come up with an idea, like framing in that way can be helpful to getting a bit of inspiration. And then actually, like getting started is really the hard part. I mean, coming up with the idea is one thing,
Yeah.
but the process of, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
What do I do now? What do I do now? And then learning along the way, it's time consuming. If you have some people who are fortunate to maybe have really great mentorship,
Yeah.
maybe they're around other people who have done this before and can sort of like, it's almost like having like great mentors are like a strategy guide for a video game.
Yeah.
If you pick up a strategy guide, that guide's going to tell you exactly, go on this quest first,
Right.
go to this random corner of the map and find this hidden token.
Yeah.
And so you have this like, oh, I can, what otherwise would have taken me 10 hours of, wandering around is now going to take me 1 hour because of the strategy guide.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's really like what mentorship provides in that way. Good mentors, at least.
Yeah.
So anyway, I can go on a tangent with entrepreneur advice. I think that for me was a big initial hurdle.
Yeah.
Um, I was, in my hometown there, I wouldn't say I was in an environment where there was like a lot of, entrepreneurial resources.
Right.
And I hope so. One day, if I like make it big, I want to try to instigate that, go
Yeah.
back to my hometown and like try to create thoughts
Nice.
that in some ways. But I think that's a big part. Getting started is hard. Thankfully, there's a lot of resources. My recommendation, if someone is interested in starting their own
Yeah.
thing, um, looking for incubators, looking for accelerators. Those are some of the key phrases
Yeah.
in your community. Is a great way to start networking with other entrepreneurs and at least get around a group of people who are problem solvers.
Yeah.
Finding the people who are solution oriented or want to try to come up with ideas, that's a big key indicator because most folks kind of stop at identifying the problem. You need to
Right.
go find the other people who are looking to also address these issues.
Well,
So finding other,
I would say
oh, go ahead.
you took, your sort of exploration into this is actually more difficult because you're putting gear into hospitals, which is a whole nother level of, approval and making sure it's all, safe for the rooms and whatnot too, right?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, part of it depends on. I mean, so I hesitate only because I know friends who like work in like more extreme versions of healthcare that I would
Yeah.
say they go through a lot more than we do. Go karts are like relatively, it's at the end of the day, it's like a glorified shelf,
Yeah.
that we put an Xbox on, and so there are some considerations like durability. We want to make sure the go karts, as you wheel it around, if it bumps into walls, like we have to think
Yeah.
about it. Things, the plastic material itself. We like use UL certified resins that resist certain levels of heat
Yeah.
and can be cleaned easily. But even just the process of figuring out how do you build something, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that was a learning that building the iteration of the go kart we have now took me a lot of time because we were going through the process of like, okay, well, how do you build something? Now,
Right.
someone who does that, if you're like a product manager at a hardware company, it might seem obvious to you because that's what you do professionally,
Right.
But when we were starting out, that was a learning for sure. So definitely, like, I think it was difficult, but it's also necessary. Going through learnings all along the way is, I think, a part of anyone's journey in founding a company. If you're running a nonprofit, I actually think in some ways it's probably more difficult, at least from a funding standpoint.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can say this with a level of objectivity now because last year I launched a pizza company with some
Yes.
friends, and I've never had people write larger checks faster for a pizza company than I ever had. Like, we rounded up like 300 grand or so
Yeah.
in like investment funding to kind of get our kitchen up and running. So quick plug. I started this company, Detroit Pizza Depot. I grew up in Michigan. We have the style of pizza. It doesn't really exist in LA. Selfishly, I wanted to be able to order better pizza living in the city. And I reached out to a buddy and was like, listen, man, he started a food truck back in our hometown. I was like, put away your truck, come to Los Angeles. Like people don't even they have no idea what they're missing. And so I reached out to a handful of friends and we rounded up some investment money to like get this kitchen up and running. So far so good. We have been open 7 months now. Pizza is delicious. Reviews are pretty good. I think we're at like 4.8 stars on most of the delivery apps. So we're trying to open kitchen number 2 maybe this summer. Our first goal is don't lose money, eat for free.
Right.
The second goal is multi-million dollar pizza mega corp. So
Now,
somewhere
what is a Detroit pizza? Because I hear Chicago. So I'm from Newfoundland. So, we're just used to frozen pizzas coming out of, the grocery store. And then living in Connecticut, Connecticut has their own style of pizza. Chicago, what is a Detroit pizza?
Detroit style pizza is kind of like brownie in pizza form.
Oh, okay.
So Chicago style, if you think of like the thickness of a Detroit style pizza,
Yeah.
it's actually more accurate to compare it to like a focaccia bread, where it's got some substance to it.
Yeah.
It's probably like an inch or two high, crispy edges. It's made in oil pans.
Okay.
That's where there's like this whole origin story. Like back in like the late 40s, there were these guys at a bar called Buddy's in Detroit.
Yeah.
They would hang out there all the time. And they were trying to recreate focaccia bread that they had discovered in Italy while they were overseas during the World War. But they didn't have any square-shaped pans to like make the dough. So one of the guys worked at like a nearby auto factory, and he grabbed one of his oil pans, cleaned it out, and they put the dough in. And then when they baked it, because of the shape of the pan, all the cheese kind of like bleeds to the edge of the crust and creates this like caramelized edge.
Oh.
It's really crunchy, really flavorful. So it's kind of like soft up until you get to the crust, and then the crust is like the payoff. It's like it's just delicious. And so they call it Detroit style pizza. They added to the menu this place called Buddy's.
Yeah.
And then over time, like there were a couple guys who worked at Buddy's that ended up going and launching their own concepts.
Yeah.
So in Michigan, this style of pizza, in other parts of the Midwest, this style of pizza is actually fairly common. Like if I were to say to you, let's order Jets, let's order Buddy's, let's order Cloverleaf, high side, it would just be implied, oh, you're probably going to get like, we're going to get a square shaped pizza.
Yeah.
In Los Angeles, it doesn't like, I didn't know growing up that it was so regional though. Like as soon when I moved to LA, like for 2 years living here, I was like, where's the pizza? Like, does anybody like, I'm not finding anything that was really landing with me. And then I would show my neighbors pictures, like, where can I find Jets? And they're like, what do you mean? What is that? Like, is that a casserole? And I was like, no, this is. And then I realized, oh my God, people literally have never seen this before.
Right.
They don't know this is a style of pizza that exists. We didn't even call it Detroit style pizza growing up. It was just like, do you want to order Jets? So now I'm like, we need to spread this message to the world. Like Michigan's a very strong pizza state, actually. Domino's was founded in Michigan, Little Caesars. We have all sorts of like unique spots, Cottage Inn, places that exist.
Yeah, your monthly pizza
House,
I saw looks really good.
Thank you. Yes. The Detroit Philly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like kind of a Philly cheesesteak remix. We have one that I think we'll do later this year. It's like a carne asada pizza.
Oh, okay.
It's like little steak chunks with avocado. Dude, it's I have ate more pizza in the last 6 months than I have in my entire life since we opened.
Our local spot did one recently. It was like a cheeseburger pizza with like ketchup and mustard and some pickles on it. Oh, it was yummy too.
It's funny you say that. If you scroll through my Twitter, I think it was like a month or two ago, I tweeted we're planning on making a cheeseburger pizza as well as like a monthly special. I thought it was really good, and we kind of like had some like In-N-Out style sauce on it.
Oh, nice.
Which speaks to the area. Yeah. So asking people to when people donate, it's really an expression of shared values.
Right.
It goes back to what we were saying earlier. Like when I donate to a cause, it's because I believe this thing is important. It needs to exist in the world. And so you think about a lot of nonprofits are an expression of values.
Yep.
We believe preserving classical music is important.
Yep.
Symphony. We believe people having an understanding of history is important. Museum.
Yeah.
We believe a certain religious, we have a certain religious belief.
Yep.
Religious institutions. College. We believe education is part. So there's all sorts of like nonprofits exist in a variety of forms.
Yeah.
We believe video games should exist in hospitals. Gamers outreach.
Right.
And so to donate, when you're the activity of nonprofits is quite a bit different in that sense. Like a nonprofit that raises $1 million is very different than a for-profit company that generates $1 million in revenue.
Right, because
think
people are donating, or not really donating, they're investing and expecting some money to come back, so they don't mind paying the money then.
That element of incentive is in my opinion, undeniable like piece of what instigates people allocating their funds in certain ways.
Right. Yeah.
And the role of nonprofits, and that's why nonprofits I think are good at instigating a founder, is you have to find other people who share
Right.
these values with you.
Yeah.
And even when you do that, you know, for someone to donate $10,000 versus $100 is very different. I have folks were willing to sign $10,000 checks way faster than anyone has ever donated $10,000 to Gamers Outreach. And that's not a critique. I'm just saying, like, you know, comparing the two.
Yeah.
It's. I think if someone has a desire to start a nonprofit, you know, first off, I mean, doing that, it's nonprofits make they do a tremendous amount of good in the world.
Yeah.
And I would never discourage someone from starting a nonprofit. It's you really just have to make sure. I think I had this kind of like personal, sort of philosophical wrestling match with myself at one point. You really need to make sure that the reason you're working in that nonprofit is because you believe in what's being done.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, you know, you'll be with it for the long haul.
Yeah.
If it's something that you truly, I'm committed to this, for better or worse, we're making this happen. And sometimes you get invited along the way to recommit.
Yeah.
I just saw this Twitter thread from one of the co-founders of Netflix just yesterday. Actually, it's relevant to this topic. He was telling this story about how when him and Reed Hastings went into a meeting with Jeff Bezos at Amazon.
Yeah.
Amazon apparently was considering buying Netflix. And the offer Amazon made was like, what was it, like low 8 figures?
Yeah.
It wasn't compelling to them at the time because they were already in it. And they looked at each other and was like, yeah, could we exit now? Yes, but do we believe this is like, does this really feel like the right thing to do given the activity we're starting to see and how far we've come? Not really. And it's funny because, you know, most people you hear like 8 figures, that's a ton of money, man. Why do you leave that on the table? But you know, when you're in it, it's different. You perceive it all differently. Like 8 figures for one person is a lot of money.
Yes.
But 8 figures when you're building a massive global corporation is not a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still a good chunk, but like, you know, you have to think about like the scale of the things you're working on. They require more resources.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not just trying to buy yourself Subway sandwich each day, you know, to like, okay, look, I can pay my rent and, you know, feed myself. You're trying to build this giant network, which requires massive resources.
Yeah.
And they said no. They're like, hey, we're going to continue down this path. It's kind of like the same story they tell about Blockbuster. Blockbuster had that opportunity by Netflix. They didn't. And he made this point that I totally agree with. You get these moments where you have to decide, are you going to keep going?
Yeah.
And I find this often happens when you have a big win or a major loss.
Yeah.
The big win happens and you feel, wow, does it go up further from here? We've delivered go-karts to every hospital in the country. Does it go further from here? Or when the loss happens, we just had a terrible fundraising event.
Yeah.
No, we haven't, but I'm just saying as an example.
Yes.
Like, oh my gosh, like,
is this
actually early days of Gamers Outreach, like some of our very first events didn't really generate much money.
Yeah.
And I had to ask myself, do I want to keep doing this? Is this worth the time? Do people care about this like I care about it? And in each moment, I decided to persist. You know what? No, I do like doing this, and I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
And had I not had those little moments of decision, you know, Gamers Outreach wouldn't exist right now, potentially. Or maybe another cause might exist, you know, and so on. But yeah, I think that's kind of a part of the psychological journey founders go through.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, like the success stories are basically the founders who sort of navigate that and continue on.
Right.
And then are somehow able to dodge all the potholes along the way.
Yeah.
And sometimes potholes add up that you can't, it's impossible to dodge. I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at the pandemic as an example, like if you were running a restaurant and the government is forcing you to shut down, pretty hard. I mean, that's a totally unforeseen, like,
absolutely,
circumstance, right?
Yeah.
So even like the best operators are, hey, dude, I don't know what to do if there's anything.
Exactly.
So that's an instance where like maybe it's unavoidable, but you know, as much as you can, you're trying to find the right things that line up to make it okay. I can go to the next step.
Yeah.
So I would say that's a very broad answer to your question. Like, what was difficult about Gamers Outreach? I think starting a company is difficult. People should try it themselves. It will at least build an appreciation for things that exist in the world.
Yeah.
Like the stuff that we all enjoy doesn't just magically happen.
Right.
It's because somebody thought it was worthwhile to make a mouse, to
Yeah.
make a coffee mug,
Yeah.
to make an annual report for the hospital, you know, like it all comes from somewhere. The paper that made this annual report, you know, it's like, it really helps you appreciate the world around
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
And now looking back over the 16 years, what have been some of the highlights? There's some moments that stick out as like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like, was it whether it's the first cart you delivered to that hospital or, something else along the way?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a bunch, and all for different reasons too. I think first and foremost, making an impact and hearing stories from families and health workers
Yeah.
is priority number one, and the thing that it never gets old.
Yeah.
I mean, knowing that, obviously, if we got to a point where health workers were like, "Hey, these games don't mean anything anymore," like we're okay. Well, I guess we'll,
Yep.
we'll what we're doing isn't necessary. We'll see ya. But that's definitely not the case.
Yeah.
We have, obviously we have hospitals that are, telling us like, hey, we want more games. Can we get more go karts? I had a dad. I was visiting a hospital. This is years ago now, but there was a parent who was telling me like his son had a certain blood condition,
Hmm.
and he had these, various tubes running through his body, and he had to kind of walk around with, I'm blanking on the name of it, but like a little, like kind of little,
IV stand or
stand we use-
something.
yeah, like an IV stand,
Yeah.
yeah, and sorry, I haven't ate lunch today, so my brain is like a little slower than normal. So this kid was like walking around with this thing attached to him, and his dad was saying, we often use video games to connect
Yeah.
because my son and I can't take my son on the playground and toss a football around like other
Right.
parents can. I can't go roller skating or do these other things. So instead we play video games,
Yeah.
and that's how we connect. Him and his brother and me, we like to play Ninja Turtles, and that's what we do. And they were playing Ninja Turtles as we were talking. And he's like, he said, "Thank you for doing what you guys do. Like this, having these games here we play them every time we're in the hospital, makes a
Yeah.
big difference." And for the video game for us, I mean, we see this, every week.
Right.
I mean, it's happening probably right now as we're speaking, right? Like, there's something happening in a hospital, kids are playing on our devices,
Yeah.
and that kind of those interactions they really light a fire to
Yeah.
like want to make you keep going.
Oh,
Like
good.
there's like we got to keep doing this, right? We've got to build the world where hospitals all have video games, and so it's just very inspiring in that way, to know that kids and families are regaining a sense of joy and normalcy, really thanks to the efforts of the gaming community. So that to me is the big win. That supersedes everything else. I mean, we tell folks all the time, like, we exist to support the hospitals and the patients in those places, and that's it. Full stop. If a donor were like, "Oh, I want to go do something for a hospital," but it wasn't clearly beneficial for the hospital patients, we tell the donor, "We're not the cause. Like, you should go somewhere else, or maybe this isn't a good idea." So we always prioritize the well-being of hospitals and patients, first and foremost. Um, I'll also mention, because I got sort of deep into our origin story. We had the opportunity to go on the CNN Heroes program back in 2019. So CNN, every year they have this thing called CNN Heroes, where they'll identify different people who are running cool, charitable causes,
Yeah.
and they'll highlight their work, and then they'll sort of invite like the top people from the year to like a gala that they
Yeah.
televise. And we got invited.
Oh,
We were one of the
wow.
ones selected. Yeah, so we're on this like televised gala. Anderson Cooper hosted the show with Kelly Ripa, and then they have a bunch of like actors and musicians kind of introduce each person, and they do a big
Yeah.
fundraiser, and it's really sort of elaborate event, really fun. And I thought that was like a really cool moment for our cause, because
Yeah.
first off, it was a tremendous opportunity to highlight the work everyone has been doing for gamers outreach, and to
Right.
sort of get this like, CNN they've got crazy distribution. You can go to an airport and there's CNN playing,
Yeah.
right? And so that was a really cool moment of awareness for the cause. It was also, I thought, a cool full circle story for how we started,
Yeah.
because now we as gamers are the talking heads in the media.
Right.
And so the great irony, it all comes full circle, is, the stereotypes that existed around games and the gaming community, and, like now we get the chance to tell our side of the
Yeah.
story. And I really gave props to CNN for having us on, because I felt, that hadn't been really done
Yeah.
often in the past. Now it's less, again, I'm referencing stuff that really,
Right.
2008-ish era was more of a thing. But, nowadays it's like, look, if a politician blames something on video games, it's like, okay, come on, man, clearly you're like dodging you're dodging
Exactly.
the real issue
Yep.
here. So I think that was just a really fun moment.
Yeah.
And again, I just and from a story standpoint, I just felt like that was like a really cool, like, sort of
Exclamation
icing on
mark.
the
Yeah.
cake. Yeah,
Oh,
totally.
cool. And
Yeah.
now, if people are out there listening, how can they help out? Do you accept donations of like games that people don't use anymore, or really, or efforts, or how can people help?
We do. Well, people can check out our website, gamersoutreach.org, and all the information is pretty much there. You can
Yeah.
click donate, and then we have kind of a list of ways people can get involved, whether it's through donating funds, donating used video games, volunteering. Sometimes we have volunteer opportunities that pop up in hospitals where maybe like some gaming carts are delivered. People can go and help assemble
Yeah.
them. Um, so there's all sorts of things that happen. We're looking for volunteers really at this point now, even around the world to some extent, to help with little things that might pop up in certain
Yeah.
hospitals.
All right.
And then we're on social media as well at Gamers Outreach, pretty much across all
Awesome.
the
Now,
all the
how
platforms.
did the pandemic, affect gamers outreach? Because there was, nobody could go anywhere essentially, and hospitals were in a lockdown mode.
Yeah, I mean, for us, the pandemic ended up, I think, I mean, so all pandemic stuff aside, just in terms of the Gamers Outreach,
Yeah.
you know, activities, the pandemic accentuated the reason we do our work.
Yeah.
Because from a entertainment standpoint, oftentimes in hospitals, the people who are providing toys to kids, reading books, the magicians, the therapy
Yeah.
dogs, a lot of times those are managed by volunteers.
Yeah.
People coming to the hospital, volunteering to play music for the kids for the day. And during the pandemic, all volunteer programs were put on hold.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as well, the kids who maybe otherwise would have been well enough to like leave their rooms and walk around to a playroom or other areas of the hospital were stuck in their rooms
Yeah.
because the hospital didn't want to, they didn't want to instigate any spread.
Right.
And so, we were as busy as ever during the pandemic because video games were one of the few things kids could do.
Yeah.
And as well, there's a healthcare shortage right now. I mean, in terms of like staffing in hospitals, like staff, we need more health workers at the moment. And so all these things were happening, and video games are one of those few activities healthcare staff could turn to try to prevent the kids from bouncing off the walls.
Yeah.
And so we ended up, I mean, we delivered more gaming carts than we ever have to date.
Yeah.
During the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
Thankfully, as well, we were very nervous at the start from a fundraising standpoint. The gaming community really stepped up. We ended up having some pretty big years of growth relative to Gamers Outreach in the past, and so we were able to fundraise. We had to, make some pivots. Like in 2020, we have our LAN party. Our event was supposed to happen right before the lockdowns kind of took place, and so we ended up canceling the event. And then like the next week, lockdowns happened, so it was the right decision. But the we had to we're gonna do an online fundraiser, I guess. Will people still participate in this? And so yeah, we were definitely nervous. And I think even now, if you fast forward to the state of the world now, like, there's a lot of uncertainty. The economy's in kind of a weird place. Like we're still, I think we had the sort of, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of the like direct consequences of shutting down physical locations, and now we're sort of seeing the residual economic effect of that. And that's hopefully those things resolve themselves in the near future, but it's gonna be kind of a tough spot for people. So but our programs still are happening. We still have a job to do. We've got fundraising to do. We still have needs to meet. So we're hopeful we can keep fundraising, keep making an impact in the hospitals we're trying to support, and folks can definitely get involved if they're interested on our website.
Awesome.
gamersoutreach.org.
Any partners or people along the way you'd like to recognize that have been there for you guys?
Oh, there's so many. I almost hate answering that question just because if I leave somebody out, I get called out for it. Yeah, I mean, just recently we announced we're building a new version of our go-karts. NZXT was actually a big part of helping us, kind of redesign and rethink the gaming carts. We're investing in a new manufacturing process that's going to let us build carts in the thousands of quantities instead of the hundreds. And so we're very excited about that. And then to their credit as well, Child's Play, which is another video game charity, they actually funded a grant which enabled the process we have now, which was a big reason we were able to really kind of get the go-kart program to where it is today. And so they've been a cool partner of ours. We still work together. So we collaborate quite a bit with some of the other video game charities that float around in the world. We've actually had funny moments where like Extra Life, for example, people have done fundraisers via Extra Life, and then the money goes to the hospital, and then the hospitals come to us and said, hey, we just got this money from this gaming group. Can we use it to build a gaming cart? And we're like,
Right.
well, yeah, of course. So I've had some fun conversations with like the Extra Life team over the years where it's like, hey, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but like we sort of work together, and that's just really cool to see,
That is cool.
so there's a lot of collaboration in that sense. Xbox has been a huge partner of ours. I mean, you look the videos we were just referencing, that video with The
Right.
Rock, for them to think about us while they're in the midst of launching
Yeah.
a new console is very considerate. Um, and I mean, just props to their whole team. Aaron Greenberg's on our board. Phil Spencer has been a big advocate. He wore a T-shirt one year
Oh, shoot.
during E3, which is like really surreal to see. And yeah, they're just really cool
Cool.
supporters. So yeah, I mean, I could go. There's a list.
Yeah.
I'm already missing people.
No worries.
We try to recognize. I will say we actually do. We're going to revamp it a little bit on our website later this year, but we are starting to like recognize partners kind of from a legacy
Oh,
standpoint on our
okay.
website. So there's like a partners page on the Gamers Outreach website, and as partners reach sort of certain levels of giving,
Yeah.
they can like earn a place on our
Oh,
website
nice.
in perpetuity. So um,
That's cool.
yeah, it's there's a bunch of folks involved, and everybody helps make an impact in
Yeah.
their areas. So it's
Excellent.
pretty cool.
Speaking of E3, how bummed are you about that?
Yeah, my thing is, so on one, I see it both ways. My preference is for E3 to exist in its sort of traditional state.
Right. Yeah.
I understand the world we live in, where look at the end of the day, if I'm a video game company, I have an announcement, I can just make an event, and boom,
Exactly.
if I want to put content to the world, I can do that. Makes total sense. Also, frankly, you have more control, right? Like maybe you spend the same amount going to E3 that you would just producing your own event.
Exactly. Yeah.
I totally get it. I mean, frankly, we run our own LAN party for that reason. Like
Yeah.
it makes sense to me. As well, I mean, frankly, even you think about like E3 from a business standpoint, like, I mean, it used to be, Walmart would come to E3 and they would have meetings to figure out like, okay, how many copies of Call of Duty
Right.
are we going to put in our stores, right? And so that's what it was. Like that was the business conference for the industry.
Yeah.
Like, let's figure out, like how many consoles are we going to place in all the Best Buys, and
Yeah.
have those discussions. And then it kind of morphed into, more consumer show. And I know a lot of industry people used to like, and I'm sort of indifferent to this topic because we give games to the hospital, so
Yeah.
when I go to E3, it's just fun. But I can understand where, if you're like, hey, I've got to have meetings, but now we also have to think about like creating a whole fan experience. Like that's a lot of
Exactly.
work
Yeah.
or budget. Yeah. So I definitely understand all of that from the, in a sentiment aside, like it makes sense why
Yes.
companies in the gaming industry would be very like skeptical of that sort of format of show, given the world we live in.
Yeah.
And I think just, interpreting, like, if you look at like what Jeff Keighley has been doing with his like Summer Games Fest, like
Yeah.
it makes sense. Like, let's just showcase the game, let's showcase the games, let's talk to developers. And he's been trying to kind of like think about, okay, here's what, what does this time of the year look like for the video game industry?
Yeah.
And how could we make that more effective for the video game companies? Which makes sense. I think that's the priority.
Yeah.
My concern is more around less physical opportunities for us to gather as video game enthusiasts and as an industry collectively.
Yeah.
Because I think it's very easy for us as an industry to become siloed. Generally, it's like, oh, you work at Activision, well, you're going to go to that office each day, and the chance of you going to visit another studio, it's like pretty limited based on what you're doing.
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, well, you have to kind of sort of go like the Bethesda route, where now we run QuakeCon, and
Yeah.
I mean, they've been doing it for years, but like, like, and I'm actually excited. I'm planning to attend QuakeCon this year, hopefully. So as an attendee, I want to go join someone else's LAN party. But they like will companies now create their own events? Will
Right.
Xbox? I mean, Xbox was doing FanFest, for a while. Will that come back? But then I still think it kind of segregates fans in
It
some
does.
ways.
Yeah. And because
So-
fans are only going to pick which show they're going to go to, where E3
Right.
was, all right, we're going to see Microsoft, we're going to see PlayStation, we're going to see all this other stuff. And it was a big experience, meeting up with the other people and yeah, it was just, you're not going to get that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, or at least until someone else creates it, right?
Yeah.
Like MLG, going to MLG events back in the day, which I feel like were basically how I spent my college years. You would go, and as a Halo player, I was exposed to StarCraft players
Yeah.
and Call of Duty players, and people from the fighting game community. And part of the fun was getting all those interactions
Mhm.
where you otherwise, I mean, you wouldn't have.
Right,
And
yep.
so there was that additional layer of exposure. And ultimately means like somebody else has to step forward and create that sort
Yep.
of event. But it's a lot of work to produce an event like that,
Oh, absolutely.
and there's a lot of cost too. I mean, it's expensive to produce
Yep.
trade shows. So, um, yeah, so, I mean, you still have like ESL. I mean, doing events. I don't know. There's definitely like it does feel like there's a little bit of a vacuum for, or there's a little bit of a void, I should say, for like what used to be more like kind of grassroots, open bracket type gaming competitions. And then you
Yeah.
think about like, hey, just as an industry, like going to Penny. I mean, Penny Arcade Expo obviously still, I think, will remain a big consumer show.
Yeah.
If anything, it might make those shows bigger because E3, if E3 is totally shifting, maybe PAX is the thing that fills that void in
Right.
their various locations. But even so, I just think like I think E3 had sort of a unique vibe to it because it was an industry show.
Exactly, yeah.
And QuakeCon has its own vibe. It's like PC gamers, like, and I don't know. I guess that's the value of like the individual events. This is just a stream of consciousness. I have mixed feelings about E3 missing. I will say, as owning a pizza shop in LA,
Oh,
like it's a
yeah.
bit of a bummer because you also see, like, I live in downtown Los Angeles now, and shows like E3 bring so much activity to the
Yeah.
city. They really help the restaurants, and it's so important to
Yeah.
the city. When it's still in the midst of trying to recover from the pandemic.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
living
true.
and seeing LA during the pandemic, like downtown LA has probably taken like 5 years, maybe 10 years backwards, so
Oh, wow.
steps back. Just yeah, I mean, the pandemic really was really hard in the city, and
Yeah.
so I think events like E3 help bring people to the city, help encourage businesses to develop here. So I don't know, there's ebbs and flows to it for
Yep.
sure, but I don't know, man. I'm bummed. I hope E3 comes back. I hope it's meaningful for the industry if it does. That's sort of my open opinion on it.
Cool.
Yeah.
All
Not
right.
super conclusive, I suppose. I see both sides of it. Yeah.
Oh. Hey,
So-
I also saw that you were one of the highlights was the Forbes 30 under 30. That's kind of cool.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. Yeah, Forbes, every year they highlight the entrepreneurs across different industries.
Yeah.
And we were recognized. I said we, Gamers Outreach was the reason I was on the list. So
Yeah.
I like to affiliate the accomplishment to our team collectively. But yeah, I will say that making that list opened up a lot of opportunities for Gamers Outreach for
Yeah.
sure.
Awesome.
I've made, some of my, on a personal level, some of my best friends have been other entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
who are other listers, based in Los Angeles. And then we've received a number of donations, thanks to folks on the list or,
Yeah.
being exposed to people from the list. Yeah, it's interesting. Every time that Forbes application pops up, like the internet loves to like hate on the Forbes list. And it's
Yeah.
fair to say, like, these awards and lists, I mean, at the end of the day, like, if you're an entrepreneur and if you create a company, that in itself is an accomplishment. If you're
Yeah.
generating revenue, you're making a product people like, at the end of the day, that's really the true measuring stick.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of charlatans on these lists for sure. Yeah, I mean, I have some stories I could tell, but I mean, there's also, you have both really. It's the problem is it's the best of both worlds. It's kind of like these lists, they attract people that are movers and shakers, and they
Yeah.
also attract people who are trying to, maneuver their way into
Finagle their
social
way, yeah.
circles. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's, it's you got to keep a head on your shoulders,
Yep.
your head on the swivel to kind of watch out. But I mean, it's case in point. Like there's a story, I can't remember there was like a girl who started a company, and she I think she got bought by JP Morgan, and then they found out like she fabricated like the number of users her software platform actually had,
Oh,
and they paid
wow.
like millions of dollars for this apps, and now they're suing her. It's this whole thing.
Oh, jeez.
And it's funny because like in the charges against her, they I think the prosecutors specifically referenced that she was a Forbes under 30 lister, and so
Oh, God.
some of I'm in this WhatsApp chat with some Forbes listers, and they're like, "Oh, Forbes list, they're calling us out, man!" And it's just it's kind of it's kind of a little bit of a dig,
Yeah.
It's but the thing is, it's if you think about a business magazine like Forbes, it's people use that as sort of this sort of reputational
Yeah.
accolade, and but it's there's you see both. I mean, at the same time, you look at Mark Zuckerberg alone has created, I mean, what is Facebook worth now? Billions
Right.
and billions of dollars, the founders of Stripe, and I mean, you can start going through the list of
Yeah.
like very successful under 30 founders. So you see both, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's been fun. I mean, that recognition for the organization. My personal viewpoint is I try to remove my own ego from it,
Yeah.
and you know, first and foremost, it goes back to patients and the healthcare staff.
Yeah.
So, anytime if we are recognized in some way, if it's an award or something like that, I try to maintain a sense of awareness. Like,
Yeah.
this is really about the folks we're helping.
Yeah.
I definitely will. I won't be falsely modest. I'll take some credit for sticking with it through the years.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
good job to me. But and otherwise than that, it's like this work is only possible because we have a team of very committed staff.
Yeah.
Many of whom have sacrificed careers elsewhere to be a part of Gamers Outreach.
Yeah.
We have a team of volunteers who show up in hospitals and to produce our Gamers for Giving event. And then there's a number of streamers who have rallied their communities to support this work in their local hospitals. And so I think of it as it's really a trophy for us as gamers to share.
Yeah.
All the stuff, the CNN stuff, Forbes, other things that have popped up over the years.
Yeah.
Like, something
cool.
something I think the community can be proud of.
Yeah,
hopefully.
absolutely. So now, when you're not doing the Detroit Pizza Depot, you're not doing some Gamers Outreach. What are you doing? Do you have any time after you leave to head home for the night?
Yeah, I mean, on a personal level, yeah, I mean, nowadays, there's a team. I mean, I do spend the majority of my time on Gamers Outreach and pizza. I like to joke like, that's my day is pizza and video games these days. As on a personal level, I try to go to the gym. I have a husky. I love my dog a lot. I post my Instagram stories are like probably 50%. I hang out at this park called Dog People pretty regularly. It's this like really bougie dog park in LA. And it's just really fun. They have fun events, and I like kind of winding down there with my dog. So yeah, I have a husky. I go rock climbing occasionally. I'm on a go-karting team. Played music my whole life, so I started playing drums in like 6th grade.
Yeah.
And have a drum set.
Do you go out to any live music? Is there any bands out there people should check out?
Man, that's I'm actually mad at myself because normally I'd have a list of recommendations. Let's see. I have to go through my phone to remember. First, okay, I will give a plug. A buddy of mine, Sammy Bowler, is actually a really phenomenal guitarist, and people should check him out. He's on Instagram.
Yeah.
I have to double check his last name spelling, but SammyBeoller, and he is an amazing musician.
Yeah.
I've never met somebody who has such a strong aura of music when you meet him in person. Like, you can just tell, like, dude, if you find yourself in a career where you're not playing music, you've done something wrong.
Yeah.
Like, this needs to.
Cool.
So, yeah, selfish plug, Sammy Bowler, rock and roll. I definitely love, I gravitate more towards like rock music for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can start naming. I love like 80s metal, like I just like really 80s music generally. I feel like that genre that it was so.
Are we talking about
like
the glam bands, or are we talking more like Motorhead and
a lot of it? I mean, really all of it. Like, I love
Yeah.
like Nitro back in the day, the hair metal band.
Yeah.
Michelangelo Badio, a phenomenal guitarist. Steve Vai, Joe
Yeah.
Satriani, Metallica, Van Halen. You just start going through all these classic bands.
Also, out in your neck of the woods out there now, you had like Faster Pussycat, L.A. Guns, the big hair,
Yep. Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I'm a little behind on like the modern scene because I just I don't have as much time to commit to it. Like
Yeah.
So, and then of course I'm still trying to sneak in video games. Usually, if I have like a night off, I'm trying to play StarCraft. I just downloaded The Last of Us on PC.
Yeah.
So I want to. That The Last of Us actually is like kind of a gap in my gaming library. I actually have the disc, but I never ended up playing it.
Yeah.
And I like. So yeah, I've always like people like they bring up now. There's the television show. I'm like, okay,
Right.
I have to like make time to play this
Yeah,
game.
I gotta play. Yeah, I'm the same way. I gotta play the game before I can watch the show. I just never got around to playing it.
Yeah. So that's on my list. I installed it over the weekend, and I have to hop to it. I heard Cyberpunk. I heard they made a number of updates.
Yeah.
I want to get that installed. I just built a new gaming PC. Actually, I'm gonna post it on Twitter at some point. I put a ton of effort into this PC.
Yeah.
Like, I actually found a stonemason to build a granite desk.
Oh wow.
And it's like really on the top, but like yeah, I've like really intentionally like measured out like my chair to like proportionally like where
Yeah.
like how comfortable it is for me to like place my arm somewhere. And yeah, a buddy of mine's like a interior designer, and we were like looking for furniture,
Yeah.
and he was like helping me find items for my place. He's like, man, if you want something like because I was like, I've got this idea, like I've got my PC, I want it displayed a certain way, I want the desk to look a certain way, and he's like, you could actually just build custom furniture and connect me with a stonemason. And this
Yeah.
guy will just like cut rock,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
actually, dude, it's a pretty good deal too. Like not like yeah, I mean, like the desk I was looking at, we
Yeah.
got for half the price
Oh,
when we
wow.
built it.
Nice.
And yeah, I'm gonna post it on Reddit or something
Cool.
because I feel very proud of what we built.
Awesome.
But yeah, man. Otherwise, I read books, and that's
Yeah.
about. I feel like that's it. Read books, video games.
What are you reading these days?
I just bought. Uh, well, the book I'm reading right now is called The Sovereign Individual.
Yeah.
Um, and it's basically about. Sorry, I'm bringing up my books tab here. I'm kind of reading 3 books at once right now.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm reading The Sovereign Individual. And it's basically it's sort of just a book about how if I were to I mean I'm only like 30% of the way through, but it's so far it's a book about how technology is enabling more individualism,
Yeah.
basically. Like,
Okay.
stuff we kind of know, but this book was written many years ago, and so it's sort of like it was kind of prophetic in what it predicted
Yeah.
or what they're setting the stage for. I read a lot of like mostly nonfiction books,
Yeah.
businessy type books.
Yeah.
Um, I just bought Rick Rubin's new book.
Oh, have you ever listened to his podcast?
No.
Oh my God. So it's
Is that a podcast?
yeah, Broken Record. And it's
That's awesome.
him
Okay,
with
sign me up.
Malcolm Gladwell. And they bring on an artist, and all the backstory of like, they had Tom Petty's sister on talking about how Tom Petty got hooked up with the Traveling Wilburys totally by accident. He was hanging out with, I don't know who he was hanging out with, Jeff, what his name is. They ended up going over to, somebody's house, and they were just jamming, and that's how Tom Petty ended up on the Traveling Wilburys. It was just like, crazy stuff like that. Or the backstory of when he had Flea on.
That's awesome.
Yes. Yeah, it's a really great podcast. Definitely check that one out.
Dude, that sounds phenomenal, actually. I have not listened to Rick Rubin's podcast, so I'm going to add that to the list for sure.
I didn't even know he was the DJ of the Beastie Boys. And
I did not. No, I didn't realize that, actually. Funny enough, I don't know that much about Rick Rubin's background, except for that he's a music producer.
Right.
And I can't remember how I discovered him per se, but
he was the producer for Blood Sugar Sex Magic for the Peppers.
Yeah, I mean, I know he's got like a prolific history in the music scene, and I feel like I knew that vaguely.
Yeah.
But I didn't really connect dots consciously until I saw like a video interview with him, and then recently he put out his book, and I was like, this guy seems like this person has interesting things to say. I'm curious what he's about. So.
He was the reason why Johnny Cash ended up doing all the covers for Trent Reznor's songs. He got them together, and the backstory of how about like they're both sort of like not really, they're introverts, and it was crazy. It's a great pod. Totally.
That is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I'm looking it up for sure.
All right.
No question.
Well, Zach, thank you so much for doing this. But before you go, you gotta shout out somebody who may have a good story like yours that should come on the podcast. Not necessarily a gamer or somebody in the industry.
I would be curious to hear a podcast with this guy, Moritz.
Okay.
He is a partner at a company called Lightspeed, which is like a venture fund.
Yeah.
Hang on, I'm gonna put this to you in Discord. He was a top Diablo player.
Oh.
Many years ago, and basically found his career path kind of led him into venture investing.
Yeah.
And he has been involved in a number of gaming related projects.
Oh, cool.
And he just launched this Lightspeed. He's like a partner at this new venture fund called Lightspeed. Or at least they have a gaming branch. I think that's new.
All right.
If you were to do a podcast, I'm very curious because I've met him a few times, and we're like, in similar social circles, but I've yet to sit down and like hear like his whole full story.
Awesome.
So
All right, there we
not
go.
sure if he does make podcasts, but
I'll-
I'm curious to know
All
what he's
right,
about. So
awesome.
maybe we'll interview him.
Well, hey, thank you so much for doing this. It was awesome to meet you, and thank you for what you do over there at Gamers Outreach.
Yeah. Well, hey Barry, thanks for reaching out, man. This was awesome. Enjoyed talking to you.